So we're in Elul. Now, there are two different customs with regards to reciting Selichot. One of them is the Sephardi custom, which is that they begin from the beginning of Elul, and they have a very extensive Selichot which are recited, and some people have the custom to recite them at 12 o'clock at night. Some people have the custom to get up early in the morning and to recite them before they pray Shacharit. Obviously, it's a little bit difficult. Neither of those times are particularly user-friendly, and there's a lot to be said. The Selichot which are recited by the Sephardim are much longer than the Selichot which are recited, both day-wise they're much longer, and also what you're actually saying is much longer as well. The function of Selichot is what? The truth is, it's a very beautiful idea. The function of Selichot is to get us ready for Rosh Hashanah. Right, so the idea of moving into Rosh Hashanah, everybody knows that Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. We'll talk about it when we get to Rosh Hashanah itself. We'll talk about what that means exactly, the beginning of the year. But it's the new year, the new Jewish year is going to begin with Rosh Hashanah, but there needs to be a little bit of preparation in order to get us ready to be able to get to where we want to get to inside of Rosh Hashanah. Right? Rosh Hashanah is not just a festival, it's not just a time, to have a good time and to enjoy ourselves. It's also the Yom HaDin, it's a day of judgment, and it's a day that we have to take very seriously. The same way that a person would not go into a serious court case without having prepared very carefully beforehand, so too we're supposed to prepare ourselves when we go into Rosh Hashanah. That's where the Selichot, the origin of the Selichot, that's where they come from. Now, I don't know historically when they began exactly, right? I would imagine that they must have begun a long time ago. I would imagine that, again, we've got a Sephardi custom, which is probably the original custom of reciting Selichot from the whole of Elul onwards. The Ashkenazi custom is a lot simpler, it's a lot quicker. You need a minimum of 4 days worth of Selichot before Rosh Hashanah begins. So, not this year, but in other years when Rosh Hashanah begins on Thursday, so you've got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Right? That's enough time to be able to recite 4 days worth of Selichot. When you've got a situation like this year, where Rosh Hashanah is going to begin before Thursday, so the Selichot are brought back a week. So there's an extra week's worth of Selichot that are recited. We begin reciting them on the Motzei Shabbat, not before Rosh Hashanah, but the one before that. Right? So we'll end up, not this coming week, the one after, we'll end up with a week and a few days worth of Selichot. The Selichot that are recited, first of all, the accepted custom amongst most Ashkenazi communities is that the first night of Selichot are recited on Saturday night after midnight. And then the rest of the Selichot, you can recite them, either you can recite them after midnight each night, or you can recite them early in the morning before Shacharit begins, whatever you want, yeah.
Is there a din on this? Because some places start at 10:30.
Yeah, so Selichot,
some at 12:30.
Selichot really need to be recited from midnight onwards. That's really the earliest time that you can recite them. Yeah, so when you have these Selichot, they're normally musical Selichot that have a chazan and have a choir, and they're very enjoyable. If you're into that, they're very enjoyable. But they're being done a little bit too early, so you should really do your best to recite Selichot from midnight onwards. Now again, where does this custom from the Ashkenazim? Where does it come from to recite a minimum of 4 days? So we spoke about it once, I can't remember, not very long ago actually, that when the korbanos, when the sacrifices were brought to the temple, they were kept for 4 days before they were offered up, and they were studied just to make sure that they had no blemishes. Yeah.
Okay, so you said that the reason for Selichot is to prepare us for Rosh Hashanah, but don't we say in general with davening also it takes about 30 days, it would take a full month in order for someone to just be prepared for something? In terms of because when you're saying Shemona Esrei, for the little thing in between, there's in between.
If you after 30 days and you consider it becomes something which is
exactly. So
interesting, right? I haven't seen a particular connection between the two, but there is definitely a concept of 30 days means something is now fluent. It's something that you're now familiar with. It's something which is now part of you. It's an interesting idea. Yeah, you're right. When you make the changeover between Mashiv Ruach and Moed Atal, or Moed Atal and Mashiv Ruach, which is going from the summer to the winter and the winter to summer, so after 30 days of reciting Mashiv Ruach or Moed Geshem or Moed Atal, if you are unsure which one you said, you can work on the premise that you must have said it the right way, because it's 30 days, it's now a part of your tefillah, right? If it's less than 30 days and you're unsure, the assumption is that you didn't say the right thing, and that might require, depending on whether it's the winter or the summer, it might require having to go back and recite the Amidah again. Over here, I think the idea of reciting Selichot over the whole month of Elul is a lot less complicated. I don't think you need to get involved in the concept of what's called a chazakah. It's simply the idea that the month of Elul is a month which is dedicated to the essence of the month of Elul, is dedicated to the concept of teshuvah, of returning back to God. And the more we do within inside of Elul, the greater is our chance of being able to reach that point. And Selichot, again, if you read through what it is that you're saying, and of course that's a radical idea, I don't mean to scare anybody that they should understand the prayers and perhaps look through them in English first. Like really, don't take this stuff seriously. But if you do happen to do it, you'll see that it's really revolving around the idea of trying to recognize that something has been done. We've done things throughout the year that we shouldn't have done. And now we're trying to rectify what it is that has been done in order to rebuild our relationship with God. Elul, interestingly enough, it's a very, very beautiful idea. In the halacha, there's a question, normally when somebody's a mourner, so there's a custom that they lead the prayers, right, during the week. There's a question in the halacha about whether it's called an avel, whether a mourner is able to lead the prayers during the month of Elul. Because the month of Elul is considered to be like Yemei Hadin, they're like days of judgment, and if that's the case, then it's like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and Avel, a mourner, doesn't pray, he doesn't lead the prayers. Now, there's a very famous later authority called the Nodeh Yehuda, who says that he doesn't understand the question. He says, because Elul is not Yemei Hadin. Elul are Yemei, they're called Yemei Ratzui. Days of Ratzui is of I don't know how to say it in English. Wanting, but it's more than wanting. It's like days that they're very auspicious days to join together with God. Right? They've been put over there in order to allow us to build ourselves up and to get to where we need to get to. The Selichot are there in order to teach us how to do that. Right? So the more we're involved in reciting Selichot, the more connected we're going to be with the concept of God and our actions having an impact on our relationship with God. The Maharal, the great Maharal from Prague, who lived about 400 years ago, has the most astonishing idea. He says that the Yirat Elokim, the fear, the awe of God that Avram Avinu had, was not fear. It wasn't that he was scared that if he does something wrong, he'll be punished. That's a lower level of Yirat Hashem. But rather, Avram Avinu was scared that he would do something which would have a negative effect on his relationship with God. That's a very high level, right? This idea of I want to do what I'm supposed to do, because if I don't, then it will cause some kind of a separation between myself and God, which is something that we don't want to have happen. Elul is all about rebuilding. Elul is all about putting things back where they need to be. It's interesting, Elul is considered to be a notrikon for the verse in Shir Hashirim which says, Ani ledoidi v'doidi li, I'm for my beloved and my beloved is for me. It's clear from the verse, right? The first letter of each word over there spells out Elul, and it's clear from the verse that we're talking about love over here. We're talking about something which is very, very significant, very beautiful, a relationship that's supposed to exist between each Jew and God, and between the Jewish people and God as well. So it's an individual dimension and it's a collective dimension. So Selichot are there in order to build up that relationship. And that's why by the Sfadim, the minig, the custom is to begin from the beginning of Elul and to recite them every single day. Like I said, the Ashkenazim, the custom has grown up to recite only 4 days. The reason for that, that's why I started explaining, the reason for that is because when a korban, when a sacrifice was brought to the temple, it had to be kept for 4 days before it was offered up, just to make sure that there was no blemish inside of it. Right? It would be examined by the Kohanim, and if it was found to be okay, then it would be brought and it could be offered up.
So all the korbanos took 4 days before?
All of the individual korbanos that were brought, not the korban tzibur. Yeah. Which means like this, that it's a very beautiful idea. Rosh Hashanah, we're standing in front of God, and it's as if we are the korban, right? We're here in order to give ourselves back to God. Right? One of the concepts of Rosh Hashanah is the concept of coronation. What is the idea of coronation? Coronation is that there's somebody who's greater than I am, somebody who's more powerful than I am, and I subjugate myself to that entity, right? Real monarchy. I'm not talking about titular monarchy, which we have in many places today, but real monarchy is something where a person gives up his entire freedom in order to have this person rule over him.
To yield?
Yeah, very much so. I once heard from somebody from South America who said that democracy is a very, we're all familiar with democracy, but one of the most democratic things that a Senate can do is to vote themselves out of power. And in South American democracies, very often that's what would happen. The person that, the president would come and ask for more power, and the Senate would vote him more power, obviously at the expense of their own power, right? Because, there's there's a certain amount of power, and if he's going to have more, then I'm going to have less. And at some point, the ultimate, it's kind of paradoxical, but the ultimate symbol of democracy is that the Senate vote themselves out of power, and the president becomes a dictator.
Which is
right?
very normal by us.
In South America, that's the way they do things. But it's in a certain way, and I do apologize for using the imagery, but in a certain way, that's exactly what Rosh Hashanah is all about as well. What are we doing when we come to Rosh Hashanah? We're abdicating our freedom. We're giving it up, and we're giving it to God, and we're saying, here, you are our king. You tell us what we need to do. In order to get to that kind of a point on Rosh Hashanah, we need an Elul. That's what the month of Elul is all about, and that's what the concept of Selichot is all about as well. Like I said, so for the Ashkenazim, it's only a few days. For the Sfadim, it's a lot of days. And what we'll find is like this.
Does Selichot always have to be said at midnight, or can it be said at
No.
a later time?
You can say it from midnight onwards, which means that you can say them from midnight. That's the first time that you can start saying Selichot for that day from midnight.
Okay.
But if you want, you could tell them, you could say them at 3 o'clock in the morning. You could say them at 5 o'clock in the morning. You can say them at 6:30 in the morning.
You're supposed to say once a day for this.
Once a day, yeah. I'm not sure that they're going to be in here. Well, normally the thing is like this, so because the Selichot are recited every single day, and they're slightly different every single day, so they're normally booklets that come out with the Selichot inside of them. Over here, I'm sure in the yeshiva they'll hand them out at some point. Huh? For the Sfardim, you say the same thing every day, right? For the Ashkenazim, we have the general framework of the Selichot remains the same every day, right? Which means there's a lot of you begin with Yud Gimel Midot, and then you have the Selichot. But inside of the Ashkenazi text, every day there are 3 paragraphs that are recited, which every day are different. Right? And again, the framework remains the same though, which means that they're pretty much the same length every single day. The only thing is that on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Selichot are very, very long for the Ashkenazim. So the Sfadim always make a joke that they're very long because they've got to make up for all the, they spent the most of Elul not bothering saying any Selichot, so now they've got to make up. There's a whole bunch that have to be said in order to be able to catch up.
How long is Selichot on Rosh Hashanah?
How long are Selichot on Rosh Hashanah? So depends on how you do them. If you recite every single one of the ones that are in there 45 minutes is probably being pretty generous, I would say. But they're probably, an hour, maybe even longer than that, perhaps, an hour and a half. Many communities have the custom to not say them all. Right, so somebody will shout out the numbers of the ones that are being recited, and then you'll say some of them, because it does say in the Shulchan Aruch, it says that it's better to recite less with more intent, with more concentration, than to recite more with less. Right, so you'll find that in most places that's what they do, but they're pretty lengthy. Right, just something to look forward to on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Other things, customs of Elul. Right, so one of the customs of Elul, interestingly enough, is to get. It may not be applicable to most of you because you sit here in the yeshiva in the dorm, but to get. We'll get to that as well. But to get your mezuzot checked at home, right? There is a custom. It says like this: you should have your mezuzot checked once every 3.5 years, twice in 7 years. That's it. The language that's used in the Shulchan Aruch is to check your mezuzot twice. It really says pamayim b'shavua, but that can't be. It doesn't mean twice a week, but rather twice in 7 years. That's once every 3.5 years. However, there is a custom which is found inside of the Shulchan Aruch. It's just a lashon that the Shulchan Aruch uses. It's not the only time that it uses a language like that. But there is, however, inside the Shulchan Aruch it does say that it's commendable to get your mezuzot checked in Elul. Right, so again, what do you have to do if you're going to take your mezuzot down and get them checked? So the best thing to do is to write a little note. You can write in pencil on the back of the mezuzah if you want, or to put a little sticky note on it, just saying where each mezuzah came from, so that the same mezuzah will go back into the same place when you put it back again. The sofer, the scribe that you take it to, who's going to check them for you, because it's Elul, he knows he'll normally get it done in the same day. As you put it in the morning, you can pick it up in the afternoon and put them back up again. It's a question whether you need to make another bracha or not. According to most opinions, if you're putting them back up in exactly the same place that you took them down, and it wasn't gone overnight, then you don't have to make another bracha when you put your mezuzot back up. If they were gone for more than one night, or if you aren't sure anymore which one goes where, so then you should ask your COR. What is a COR?
Something rabbi.
Absolutely, you're a competent Orthodox rabbi. Just to find out what you're supposed to do.
What's the concept of checking the mezuzot?
What is the concept of checking the mezuzot? The thing is like this: that your mezuzot are written, the ink written on parchment, and even though they're not touched, right? When you kiss them, you're kissing the outside, you're kissing the bayit, you're not kissing the mezuzah itself. But nevertheless, because it's rolled up, you want to make sure that none of the letters are cracked. If a letter's got a crack going through it, then the mezuzah is no longer kosher. Right now, to fix mezuzot, if it's just a problem of a cracked letter, it's really no big deal. The sofer, somebody knows what he's doing, will fix it. He'll rewrite, either if he needs to, he'll scrape off that letter and rewrite it into completely, or he'll just fill in the crack. Right. If you've got mezuzot, sometimes mezuzot get written with mistakes. They've missed out a letter, or they've added in a letter. That's a lot more complicated, and that's things which need to be checked. What will normally happen is, if you've got mezuzot and you're getting them checked, they won't find anything wrong with them, right? The idea of getting them checked in Elul is the same way you're supposed to be checking yourself, right? So it's just like a symbolic thing. You're going to check the mezuzot, which are the guards around your home, to remind you who you are. And by doing that, hopefully it's going to remind you to check yourself as well. Yeah? Tefillin, there's also a custom to have tefillin checked on whatchamacallit, on Elul as well. Again, do you have to? You don't have to do it. Tefillin are interesting things. Tefillin are, if you wear your tefillin every day, then they're considered to be kosher. If you don't wear your tefillin every day, so for example, everybody who wears their tefillin every day, right? That came out wrong. Absolutely. I did not mean to suggest, Chalila, that anybody here is not putting on their tefillin, right? That's understood. Yeah. But some people may have a spare pair of tefillin. The pair they don't put on, right? It's a spare pair of tefillin. And if that's the case, then you should get your spare tefillin checked. You know, it's a good idea to get them checked once every 3.5 years as well. If you want to get them checked in Elul, that's also good. There are all kinds of interesting things about tefillin. I read the most incredible story. I also thought, you know, for many years walked around with this idea that tefillin is like, you know, what on earth is going to happen to your tefillin, for goodness sakes, right? You know, you put them on, you take them off. You put them on, you take them off. You're not touching the parchments. They're all locked away inside of the tefillin themselves. Right? What could happen? But I read a story, most beautiful story, many years ago, about, you know, what happens is around this time of the year, you may find in shuls all over the world, is that they come in and somebody will come in and do a tefillin checking, like, you know, again, after davening, leave your tefillin with the person, and he stays in the shul and he checks all the tefillin, puts them all back together again, and in the next morning you can get your tefillin back and put them back on. And they tell over the story about a Hasidic guy who had tefillin that he was very, very proud of, and they've been written, apparently, you know, they were very special tefillin, and he never had them checked, and he left them on the table after davening and went out to do something and got distracted, but he left them on the table where everyone that was supposed to be leaving their tefillin left their tefillin to be checked, and his tefillin got checked, and they found that the tefillin were missing a letter. In one of the parchments, there was a letter that was missing from the tefillin, which means that all those years, this guy was in his 80s already. All those years that he'd been wearing his tefillin, he hadn't been fulfilling the mitzvah properly because the letter was missing. And when they came...
You said that if he puts it on, he's fulfilling the mitzvah.
Huh?
You just said that if he puts it on, it's all...
Oh, but the problem over here is that if from the very beginning they weren't kosher, that's a problem, right? It's true. There's a concept called there's a concept called chezkat kashrut, which is if I put them into the tefillin and they were kosher when they went into the tefillin, then I can work on the premise that they're kosher.
Yeah, but
right?
you just said they make mistakes as well.
Oh, so here, under normal circumstances, when you buy tefillin, if you're buying them from a reputable place, right? First of all, the person who's selling you the tefillin will give you a photocopy of the parshiot, of the parchments, right? And he'll give you also some kind of a authorization that somebody went through it before it was put in the tefillin. It's pretty important to do these things, it really is, because, you know, mistakes can happen.
I thought that was instruction manual.
Wait a minute, I want to tell the end of the story, 1 minute. So this fellow comes back, right? Now, everybody is scared stiff. How are they going to tell him this, right? He's been putting on his tefillin, he's been boasting about this tefillin he's been putting on for the last, 67 years or something. And how on earth was anyone going to tell him? So in the end, the rabbi of the community took him to one side and he very gently broke the news to him. And this fellow, contrary to everybody's expectations, this fellow started to dance around the room. And he said, look at me. He said, I'm 80 years old. He said, I don't know how much longer I have left to live. He said, but can you imagine if this would never have happened? I would have got upstairs at the age of whenever it was, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have said to me, how come you never put your tefillin on? I'll say, you kidding? I wore them every day. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu would say, but you were missing a letter, and they were never kosher. Right? So he says, now it's been fixed. This is fantastic. I'm going to be able to wear my tefillin properly. And for however much longer I'm alive, I'm going to be able to fulfill the mitzvah properly. Which is, again, it's a very beautiful idea. We need to make sure that what we're doing it properly. We need to make sure that our tefillin are kosher. We need to make sure that our mezuzot are kosher. Right? Yeah, sorry. So you wanted to say something?
No, I was saying, I had a rabbi who bought me tefillin, and he purchased it through a store. You don't think I need to get it checked if a rabbi went to a specific place and bought it?
I would imagine
It's
that...
run by Lauffer, you have to check it. Guaranteed.
What's wrong? You send off 5 kilos cornflakes package tops, and you get a free pair of tefillin. What could be wrong with them, for goodness sakes? Believe me, I was eating cornflakes non-stop, I'm telling you, just for you. No, I would say like this. I would imagine that the rabbi is only buying from a place where he knows that he can trust the people he's buying from. He's not just going off any old ware. and you can imagine that the tefillin that you've got on as kosher as can be.
Because I didn't get what you said, like the paper, the document, and who actually filled it.
I don't know that you. All the tefillin that I've ever had any dealings with have always come with they've always come with a little authorization from somebody saying that they went through the pashas and that they're okay and that there's nothing to be concerned about.
So when a person goes through it again, they read the whole.
Yeah, it's not very much, right? It's 4 different paragraphs that appear inside of the, including the Shema, right? But it's 4 different paragraphs that appear in the Torah, the person's got to go through them. You just got to be careful. Got to make sure that all the letters are there. Part of the problem is like this: when you're used to doing this, right? So, I'm sure you can read English with words dropped out of many words with letters dropped out, right? And you'll read it fluently because you know what it's saying.
Yeah, but I'm thinking on the premise of if you're looking at it all day, every day,
Yeah,
kind of blurred together.
yeah. So you do have to be very careful. You really do, right? And that's why you'll see that most people that are checking these things, they take breaks. You've got to keep your eye on the details. It's very important. This is not like handing in an essay in school. So if you're missing an A or an O or something, it's not the end of the world, right? Because if a letter's missing or there's another letter in there that shouldn't be there or it's written the wrong way, then that means that whoever's putting on these tefillin after you've checked them is it's now your responsibility that he's putting on tefillin that they're not proper. In all events, of course, I've lost my train of thought, but that's okay, right?
Well, we got here from Mrs. being checked, every 7
okay,
years.
thank you. I appreciate it. Who told you to listen?
It's not a ball.
Well, he's new. He doesn't realize you're not supposed to listen over here. He'll work it out. It's going to be okay, I'm telling you. So many people have the custom to have their mezuzah checked on Elul and to have their tefillin checked on Elul. Like I said, again, if you take your mezuzahs off, then you should try to be careful about where which ones they came from. If they're going to come back the same day, most people do same day checking in Elul. It's a special service that's being done because lots of people are having these things checked.
How long can you have a mezuzah? Let's say the Sefer says I got to go through. He's going to delay it.
Yeah.
How long can you have? Yeah.
So normally what will happen like this, again, if you're dealing with a sofer if you're dealing with a scribe who is good and knows what he's doing, and if he needs to hold on to your mezuzot because either he's got a lot of work or because there's complications, very often he will give you spare mezuzahs to put up in the meantime.
Okay, so now, like myself living in Phoenix, we don't have a sofer. So we have to send it to LA or.
Oh, good, right?
So what do?
What do you do? So first of all, if you've got no other alternative, so you send it off, and then you have to manage without for however long it's going to take until they come back. What you'll find, though, interestingly enough, in many communities, they have what's called a mezuzah gemach, which means somebody's got spare mezuzahs, and they're happy to lend them to you until the mezuzahs come back. You have to ask around a little bit. Where I live in Har Nof, there are a few of these things.
This is Israel.
Yeah, okay, but when you've got Orthodox communities, they're like, everybody's running into the same problem. It's not, right? It's not just your problem, being in Phoenix and not having a sofa there on location. It's everybody's problem over there. And I would be very surprised to hear that, within one of the Orthodox communities in Phoenix, I'd be very surprised to hear that they don't have somebody who's lending out mezuzahs in order to put them up whilst your mezuzahs are not around. I'll just tell over a story because just to underline the absurdity of all of this. The important part of the mezuzah is the bit inside, right? The parchment, not the ornate box that it goes into that gets screwed up onto the wall, but rather the parchment inside. I have a friend who told me that he was once in Rio de Janeiro is in Mexico. Brazil, I'm sorry. He was in Brazil, and he said that a friend of his father's-in-law was building himself some incredible mansion, and he asked him whether he knew any sofrim he was going to need mezuzahs. So he says to him, sure. He says, how many mezuzahs do you need? So the guy says he needs 36, which is, I guess that's, it sounds like a lot of doors to me. So he says, you know what? He says, I'll phone up my friend in Yerushalayim. I got a friend who's a sofer. He's a scribe. And I'll ask him, how much would he take? So he said his friend, who's a scribe, is she's a very good writer, and he writes beautifully and very exactly. And he told him like this. He says, normally, I don't remember the figures, but normally I take, $75 for a mezuzah, but for that kind of an order, for 36, I'll take $50. So he went back to the fellow and he tells him it'll be $50 per mezuzah. He's giving you a special deal instead of 75. And he's able to do 36. He'll be able to get them ready within a certain amount of time. Do you want me to order them? And this fellow who's building this incredible mansion, right? He says, $50? He says, $50 for a mezuzah? He says, no. He says, I don't want to spend that. This guy's frum, right? He says, I don't want to spend that. That's too much.
He's building a mansion.
He's building a mansion, right? Who knows how many hundreds and hundreds of thousands are going into it? But he doesn't want to spend $50 per mezuzah. So my friend looks at him like, that's ridiculous. And he said all of a sudden he had like this moment of like, this. But he says to him, tell me, he says, how much are you paying for each door handle? So this fellow, all of a sudden, he said his eyes lit up. And he says, what, are you kidding? He says, we're bringing in the door handles from Italy. They're $250 a pair. They are beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So he says, he looks at this fellow and he says, I don't understand. He says, you're prepared to pay $250 for a pair of handles to go on the door, but you're not prepared to pay $50 for a mezuzah? He says, isn't something wrong here? The fellow, of course, just brushed him away and went and found cheaper mezuzahs somewhere else. But it's true, People will spend, sometimes they'll spend a lot of money on the buy it. They'll buy a beautiful silver, like a beautiful silver case, right? And it could cost, $150, $500, and they'll spend, whatever, $15 to put a mezuzah inside of it. It's wrong. We're doing it the wrong way around. Right? You should invest the money that you've got invested into the parchment, and then afterwards just spend 10 shekels on a plastic cover. It's better to spend money on the insides than not on the outside.
What's apart from the inside being accurate? What else needs to happen?
Writing style. What makes a mezuzah more expensive than another mezuzah is material up to a certain point. So there are different qualities of parchment. There are different qualities of pens. They use quills that are used. And then you start moving into the murky realms of reputation, right? So a person's got, the best way, if you want to make a good investment, right, is you find yourself a sofer who's got beautiful handwriting, who's at the beginning of his career, right? It's a little bit like art, you can, whatever. I don't know if you have to do that exactly, but if you want to have beautiful mezuzahs in your own home, right? So you find somebody who's at the beginning of his career, writes beautifully, and get him done, and you'll get him, maybe he'll charge you $35 for a mezuzah, right? $30 for a mezuzah. And later on, 5 years down the line, he's going to be charging $80 for a mezuzah, $100 for a mezuzah. It's really no different from designer wear, right? Which means that why is one pair of jeans going to cost you $250 and another pair of jeans is going to cost you $25? So one of them's got a logo on it, right?
Better quality too.
Whatever, yeah.
That's a terrible one.
Huh?
That's a terrible explanation.
Well, yes and no. I'm trying to show you. Here, you know what? Let's forget about jeans. Let's go doctor, right? What possesses somebody to go to a surgeon who's got a sterling reputation and he's 4 times more expensive than the other surgeon, in the office next door to him? Aside from that, right? They want to brag to their friends that they went to this fellow over here. But it's to do with experience. It's to do with work. It's to do with everything, really everything. And that's, I had a friend who told me that he was living in Toronto, and he was working for Samer in Toronto, and he said that they used to, a lot of very wealthy people that live in the Thornhill area of Toronto, and he said that they used to do evenings in people's homes, and he said there was one fellow over there who had millions of dollars worth of contemporary art up on his walls, and he had like a gallery, and he said one of the paintings was something that was done by one of his grandchildren. And he said didn't look an awful lot different from all the other stuff that was up there. Grandchild had done it in maybe 45 minutes or something, and it had maybe cost it probably cost like $100 to get the thing framed, which was the most expensive part of it all. And he said it blended in pretty well with all these millions of dollars worth of art. What makes something worth something more than something else? I mean, it's supply and demand, right? It's just as true. Again, what is the supply and demand inside of mezuzot and tefillin? So the reputation that the scribe has, whether he is, whether he's righteous, whether he's pious, how beautiful his writing is, all these things are going to make mezuzot and tefillin cost more.
Does this go back to the concept of Ze Eli Venvil?
Yeah.
The same concept.
Very much so, right? Which means like this, that when you buy your mezuzah, so you should put it into a nice bayit. You really should. You should try to don't buy $100 mezuzah and put it in a plastic case, right? Buy $100 mezuzah and put it into something which is going to beautify the miracle. But the more you spend on the mezuzah, the parchment itself, the greater is your beautifying of the mitzvah. So again, it's got to go according to what you can do, right? So for one person spending, instead of spending $15, he'll spend $30, and he's beautifying the mitzvah his way. For another person, it's a difference between spending $50 or $100, right? Each one according to what that person is capable of doing. I once heard something. It was very sad. I was once up in Mea She'arim in one of the shops that sell all these kinds of things, and a completely not from American couple came into the shop, and they'd seen in the window a case, a mezuzah case. They wanted to buy it for their friend who was moving into a new house, and so they asked how much it was. I don't remember whatever it was. I don't know. Whatever, $20, let's say. And then when they said, okay, we'll take it, so then the person they're selling said, well, would you like the mezuzah as well? Would you like to present your friend with a complete gift of a piece of parchment with the case? And they had no idea what he was talking about. So he said to him, what do you mean? So he got out, he had like a tray of mezuzot that were open so you could see the differences and see, right? So he says, here, this is what goes inside the case. And the people they had no idea. And of course, the first question was, well, how much is it? And the fellow said, it starts at $15. So that you see them thinking and finally they said, you know what, no, forget it, we'll just take the case. And I thought at the time, to myself, it was terribly sad, it really was. That they're going to give this case over, the person they're giving it over probably is as ignorant as they are. And they'll put up this case imagining they've put up the mezuzah without knowing there's nothing inside of it. However, there is a glimmer of light in all of this, which is that at least these people, they were Jewishly aware enough, right? They were proud enough of their Jewish identity to want to buy a mezuzah for their friend, and hopefully he put it up. So even if there's no mezuzah inside, which means that the mitzvah's not being fulfilled, but the concept of being a part of the Jewish nation. So they've got their membership card up over there. It's good, right? It's good. So we always find something good, right? Somewhere we can find something good, hopefully. Even about this class, I hope. Whatever. Anyway, so the concept of Elul, we're back to Elul, right? The concept of Elul is the concept of doing tshuva, the concept of drawing back towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think I mentioned this the other day, but it's something which it's certainly well worth repeating because it's such a beautiful idea. The word teshuvah comes from the word lashuv. Lashuv means to return. Lashuv, right? Teshuvah, right? The same words, the same letters are inside of it, and that's what we're doing. We're returning back to God. There's a very fascinating concept from one of the great Hasidic rabbis called the Sfat Emet, who says that the word Shabbat comes from the same root as well. Shuv. Shabbat. What do we do on Shabbat? We're returning back to God. We give up on the physicality of the world. We give up on Olam Hazeh, and we concentrate on Olam Haba, on the world to come. Right? And the whole essence of Shabbat is this ability that we've got to tap back into the spiritual dimensions of who we are. Get to reintroduce ourselves to the spiritual dimension inside of us, which hopefully will have an influence on the week that comes afterwards, which means Shabbat, Teshuvah, Lashuv, to return to God. That's the whole idea of what's going on, and Elul is the month that's been dedicated to help us do that.
Based on the fact that you said on Elul, we check the mitzvot to connect us to check ourselves. How do we check ourselves?
I mean, one of the basic methods of checking ourselves is by a little bit of introspection, right? What's called in Hebrew cheshbon hanefesh. Cheshbon hanefesh means sitting down and working out, who am I? Right? What have I done over here? What have I achieved in this year that has just gone past? So I did mention a few weeks ago that Elul, the idea of Elul is the month which has been dedicated to looking back and taking stock. When you've got a business, right? So normally towards the end of the calendar year, so around whenever it is, at the end of December, somebody, beginning of January, so very often businesses are closed for a day or for 2 days, and they take an inventory of their stock, right? They've got to make sure that everything adds up. Elul is our stock-taking month. You're supposed to look back, see, where was I this time last year? Where am I now? What have I done? What have I achieved? Together with all of that, of course, is the concept of what did I do wrong? Who have I hurt? Right? How can I rectify what I've done? Mitzvah Hashem will talk about it at greater length at some point, but that Yom Kippur is a day which is set aside for atonement, but it's atonement between ourselves and God. It's not atonement between yourselves and your fellow man. That requires going to the person and saying, I'm sorry that I did whatever I did. It's not enough to stand in synagogue on Yom Kippur and to fast and to afflict yourself and to pray even heartfelt prayers if you haven't actually gone to the person himself and said, listen, I'm sorry, but this is I'm sorry I did what I did. I'm sorry that I hurt you, right? So if I hurt somebody, it's not enough for me to remotely to make some kind of a remote plea for forgiveness. It doesn't work. I've got to go to the person, I've got to ask the person. You should know that in the Shulchan Aruch, for example, there's all kinds of halachas. What do you do if you've got somebody, you can't go to that person? Reuven hurt Shimon. He did something to hurt him, right? And Shimon in the meantime has passed away. What do you do now? How do you ask him for forgiveness? He's not alive anymore. So the halacha says that you should take 10 people to the cemetery, and over there you should ask for forgiveness over there. And if that's not possible, to send, let's say you've got somebody who lives far away and you're not in contact with him, you don't know how to be in contact with him, so send somebody to him to ask him for forgiveness. It's not enough just to, if I would have seen him, I would have asked him to forgive me. It's not enough. You can't do that. It needs more than that. It needs an active dimension, yeah.
Do we have the idea that if you've hurt somebody but your concern is that by trying to ask for their forgiveness, you're going to reopen that wound and it's going to hurt them more?
Yeah. That is such a complicated question. It really is. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says like this. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was the founder of the Musa movement, the movement that's supposed to turn us into better people, right? Maybe not so successfully, but supposed to. And he says like this, if by asking forgiveness, it's going to cause a person the most incredible anguish for one of two reasons. Either because he never knew, right? So somebody did something to somebody else, they never knew about it, but now he feels really bad about it and he wants to go and ask for forgiveness. And the person, he never knew about it, and if he finds out, he's going to get really upset. Or it's opening up wound, Baruch Hashem, the person's finally got over it, right? He's finally worked on himself and he's really struggled through whatever it was that happened. And then along comes the person and says, listen, you've got to forgive me, and it's going to open everything up again. Says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter that even though it's leaving the person with an incomplete tshuva, you shouldn't do it. Which means that the feelings of the person, the other person, are more important than your ability to reach where you need to reach to. Now, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta doesn't say this, but Libi Oimeli, my instinct is telling me that if a person truly wants to ask forgiveness from somebody else, but he can't, because if he does, it's going to upset him, then I think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to look at that, if it's really heartfelt, he's going to look at that as if he's actually done it. Right? Which means like this, it's not an escape hatch. It's not like, you know what, I would really ask him for forgiveness, but you know what, I don't want to upset him again, because you don't really want to ask him forgiveness at all, right? You're too embarrassed, or whatever it is. You also harbor a little bit of ill feeling after everything that's happened. Yeah, it's not going to work. Like that, it's not going to work. But if it's truly a feeling of, if I could, I would do whatever I can in order to ask forgiveness, but I can't, because if I do, it's going to upset this fellow terribly. And at that point, I think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to say, you know what, you did what you needed to do. We're going to stop over here. Apparently, we have done what needed to be done.
You've got to keep them in suspense for tomorrow.
You can see, look at them. They're hanging on to every single word over here. Okay, we're going to stop over here.